Thank you so much. We are now transitioning to the second panel, which focuses on innovative business models. For the urgency is undeniable. We do face a plastic pollution crisis, and this requires systems change. We need a circular economy approach that focuses on eliminating the plastics we do not need. Innovating to ensure that the plastics products we do need are reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and circulating all the plastic we do use to keep them in the economy and out of the environment. Companies that produce and use plastics clearly have a pivotal role to play in transforming the plastic systems. New business models are definitely needed to support the new circular economy based services and the consumer behavior. Required for addressing plastic pollution, science shows through the life cycle assessment studies that reuse systems can be far more superior to single-use products than adequately designed, and thus offer the potential to replace most single-use plastic products, which are usually among most problematic plastic uses. This session will start with an example of how stakeholders can come together to drive action towards a circular economy for plastic and discuss why this creates opportunities for businesses prepared to take up the challenge. Innovative business models that support reuse and recycling in the marketplace will then be discussed to demonstrate new thinking in the plastic systems. The session will also end with a discussion on the importance of integrated policies on reduction, reuse, and recycling across supply chains, and why this is important to achieve change at scale. Thank you. To open the session, we would like to have... C'est bon? Merci. Quickly would open the floor with Jody. Yes? Okay. So as you can see, we have 4 main panelists here. We'll have Ling Li, the co-founder of Bearpack, Jody Russell, the Senior Public Affairs Manager of Nestle, Eric Kawabata, who's the head of Asia Pacific, and also Kristen Barnes, the project lead for South African Plastic Pack. Everyone, welcome the panelists. We look forward to a fruitful discussion. Jody, now I hand you the floor.
Many thanks, Susanna, for the kind introduction. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, wonderful. Well, thank you to UNEP and our host for inviting me to join you here today and share a business perspective on this challenge. Nestle was part of a group of 140 businesses that signed a business call for a legally binding agreement. This was hosted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and WWF and brought together manufacturers, 5 million in assets under management. When we looked to the question that you'd posed to us as panelists in terms of what are some of the case studies and learnings, I wanted to talk about some of the learnings we have at Nestle. Our vision is that none of our packaging ends up in landfills or as litter. And as we look forward, we address this in 3 different ways. We look at better packaging, less packaging, and a better system. So some of our pilots were in the area of reuse and some others were in refill, and they're still ongoing. We've targeted completing 20 pilots by 2025, and we're about halfway there now. Some of them, for example, we work with Loop, where we've deployed reusable packaging with a number of retail partners in North America and in Europe for reusable packaging where customers pay a deposit and then bring it back. In Switzerland, we've tested a system called with Miwa in partnership, where there's bulk dispensing of coffee, and we're testing consumer reactions. In Chile with Algramo, we tested an ordering system for pet food on demand, where consumers could actually, with an app, choose their delivery time, and then when they approached a delivery cart, their large refillable bin would be filled with the pet food of their choice in a no-contact COVID-compliant system. And with Cyclus in Indonesia, Cyclus means cycle in Indonesian, we worked with them to partner for delivering different types of household products in small-scale refill dispensers. So these are just 4 of the different refill systems and reuse systems that we've been testing in order to learn. How can we bring this to consumers? How can we partner with retailers to make this successful? And what are the challenges that we have to address in the supply chain? I'll share with you then some of the considerations that have come out of this, as well as 4 key learnings for the future that we think we need to address together. So one of them is that reuse and refill systems are business models that require significant changes and detailed infrastructure changes for operations, supply chain, and logistics. The new business models do have considerable investments, and they're competing against highly efficient systems that have been operating for some time. Reuse laws have often been structured as waste prevention laws, and they typically are looking to achieve a certain target by a certain date. Today, for example, in France, in Germany, Romania, and Chile, we have specific regulations in place that our national teams are working to comply with. We believe that these laws need to provide clear and nationally applicable reuse calculation methodologies and reporting requirements to be successful. Strong alignment with business is key because in the end, we're the implementers of reuse and refill systems architecture, and we need to assess the business impacts of any proposed regulatory change. So targets for different product categories need to be considered carefully, looking at how can business models sustainably transition? What are the framework conditions environmentally, financially, operationally that need to be met? And how do we make it financially feasible for every value chain participant to want to make this shift? So the second question I was asked is, how do we drive these transitions at scale? So I'll share with you a couple reflections on what do we need in terms of the business environment to make reuse and refill successful. We think that taking a new look at life cycle analysis is really important. They're often considered when assessing new laws, but one of the challenges we have, both from an environmental and a financial perspective, is life cycle analyses can be run in many different ways. We think we need to take a fresh look at the role of the emissions of the implicit transportation systems that support forward logistics and reverse logistics, as well as the energy systems that are powering washing and bottling centers, because this has a significant impact on the material choice for packaging for reuse. A great model today is the one that's being run in Germany, where they've already integrated the different types of emissions profiles, whether it's a diesel truck, a train powered by electricity, vehicles powered by green hydrogen, or a mix of mopeds, cars, trucks, and large vans that are being powered with electricity. What you're using for power is going to have a significant impact on the LCAs. The second point, standards for reuse and refill. We've partnered with a group called PR3, as have many other companies, to support their development of a set of standards that can be applied globally for reuse and refill regulation. Collection points, containers, digital standards, return incentives, labeling and education standards, reverse logistics, washing, sanitation, and handling. This is all very practical, but it comes down to the types of national standards we need to have in place to make reuse and refill a viable option for the future at scale. Next, I would say the World Economic Forum is another partner of ours. We're working with them on metrics for measurement for reuse, defining how do we look at the effectiveness of a reuse system at scale, and what are the right metrics? Is it about kilos? Is it about volume of total product moved? Is it about packaging volumes? This is something that we collectively need to come to a decision on, because looking at just weight isn't going to share accurately how efficient the system is. And I'll close then with 4 summary points to keep us on schedule, because I realize our panel's between us and lunch. When we look at national legislation framing reuse and refill, this is ultimately proposing a system shift. And if we look at the shift, we need to take 4 things into consideration. One is, what are the right policy reforms? How does this integrate into EPR, an existing deposit return system? What are the incentives for the entire supply chain to participate, particularly retailers and wholesalers? Finance and investment roadmaps. What has to be built? Supply chain transition roadmaps and logistics. How are we going to address the needs there, both from a carbon perspective and an operational perspective, and recognizing there are tremendous new jobs, green jobs to be built? And lastly, packaging flexibility. How do we build a pool system or an option for individual packaging that's going to serve both the needs of economies of scale, of convenience, and of brand identity? Because we don't want consumers, from our perspective, to go to a store and not recognize a product that they've been buying for years. So there's a mix of challenges, and in the end, it's about making it work for the consumers and making it work for the entire supply chain. But this is a systems change that can only be achieved with every position in the value chain working together. So thank you.
Thank you, Jody. For the participants that are online, we'd start with Kristen Barnes. Kristen?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Is that coming through? Great. Hi. So, in terms of Asana, should I launch into the questions that have been posed to me? With that, okay, great. Thank you so much. So, in terms of the opportunities for a circular economy, so Jody's referenced some very specific examples and models and some specific levers and drivers. But I think it's also quite important to consider the circular economy for plastics that is sometimes described as a threat to the economy and the plastics value chain as a whole. It's interpreted as an approach motivated by an all plastics are bad stance. However, I do want to highlight in both developed and developing country settings that there's a demonstrated net job creation and economic value in a shift to a circular economy for plastics. And this will look like a difference in the type of jobs, as Jody referenced, that there's exciting new types of jobs that will come into play. So we are planning for a shift. And a recent modeling study considering the transition to a circular economy for plastic packaging in Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and South Africa returned the same results, that we do see net economic gain and job creation in a circular economy for plastic packaging. And this study also included a model constraint to define a circular economy of a reduction overall consumption of single-use packaging by 30%, including a phase out of problematic polymers and formats. So it's really interesting that the model returned benefits even while requiring a reduction in plastic production. And the reason I emphasize the socioeconomic benefits in job creation and economic growth is that in developing country settings, this is obviously a very key goal for a circular economy trajectory. So there are environmental drivers, and we do need to consider that. But the socioeconomics, the business case in a developing country setting is going to see far faster uptake and support and enabling. So if we're not planning to move from linear to circular in these contexts, what the study indicates is that we're actually planning to limit economic growth and job creation in the plastics packaging value chain. We also note that there are growing drivers and incentives for the plastics industry to rethink and access better feedstock that will build sustained value into their business, with the potential for more local sourcing from organic residues as the preferred pathway being investigated in many regions, and the production of plastics from organic renewable sources scaling in others. So just in terms of, I think Jody has quite adequately, or has more than adequately addressed the life cycle assessment and seeing the environmental benefits in terms of reuse systems and the sensitivity to transport logistics. But I think in terms of looking, and I will go then to my context in the developing country setting. So our overarching circular economy goals for plastics in terms of both socioeconomic and environmental benefits, looking at can be universally applied. So designing products, systems, business models that retain plastics in our economy, but how we get there. And I think that geographic specificity has also been highlighted. So in my context of a more developing country setting with an unemployment rate of 35%, expanded unemployment to 46%, an inclusive pathway is an imperative. Focus on including a large number of people at current low education and skills level, and a large number of people currently very active in the informal sector. So when considering reuse within the age of plastic, the reuse models and other interventions like deposit return schemes for recycling have entered the market at a relatively mature stage of a recycling economy in developed country settings. And these have been implemented as innovative methods to retain more material in the economy, and often driven by increasingly stringent legislated targets. In developing country settings, we need to scale reuse and other innovative business models far earlier in our circular economy trajectory, and with something of a different motive. We might not have those very stringent legislated drivers. So how can we drive and move to limit leakage into the environment? Developing countries are often highlighted as very high leakage areas, and reduce the burden on what can be very inefficient or practically non-existent waste management systems. So we can use different drivers and scale those reuse models earlier. And just some of our initial focus in terms of reuse in the South African setting, and something which is applicable in more developing country settings, is in terms of the logistics, the reverse and forward logistics, and the specifics of washing systems and the infrastructure required, is quite a significant investment in infrastructure. What we're looking to scale rapidly in our context is a model where consumer retains ownership of the containers, and they take that to refill within the context. So then we reduce the large-scale investment applied or needed. And what we see, a big sort of driver and incentive in our context, is also there is demonstrated potential globally in such contexts that you can deliver product cheaper to a low-income consumer and deliver it in the amounts that the consumer needs. So you can eliminate the need for some of the small sachets that are sold in these sort of contexts to consumers who want to buy very limited volumes at any one time. So there are also incentives and drivers within a more marketplace type setting or perspective that we can see in our context. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kristen. Just to give you a quick context, I think it'll be nice to know a bit more about Krista Barnes, who's the project lead for South Africa's Plastic Pact, which is the reason why you've heard her mention a lot about the South Africa and what we're doing in terms of developing countries. For Kristen, it's a collaborative pre-competitive initiative that brings together key stakeholders from local plastic value chains to tackle plastic waste pollution, and it's sourced by stimulating industry-led innovation, dialogue, and collaborations to create new business models and also to generate job opportunities, as you heard her mention about green jobs, and also unlocking barriers to move towards a circular economy for plastic with improved economic, environmental, and societal outcomes overall. And before we move to the next discussion point, I think we have Ling Li, who is the co-founder of Bear Pact, which is a startup in Singapore, and within connections with Sweden and France, specializing in developing circular solutions to reduce and eliminate single-use packaging in the food service industry. So quickly, as we hear from Bear Pact, I think the goal is how do we understand more about eliminating single-use disposable plastic products in the economy? And also, how can we better foster the reuse of the models in the economy? All right, Ling, are you online?
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? I hope so. So I will start. Thank you so much for having me here. And my name is Ling. I'm the co-founder of Bearpack. Interestingly, before working for Bearpack in Singapore, I have my own company in Vietnam for reusable cups in Vietnam, and I'm very lucky to see how the reuse model can work. Has been working in Vietnam, a developing country. Singapore is a gate between Asia and the rest of the world, and also able to launch a reuse model in France. So I have some experience and some insight on this model in 3 countries. So what is Bearpack is very simple. We provide reusable cups and containers at restaurants and coffees. In Singapore, we have 150 locations. In France, I think we have now 170 locations, 200 locations. And it's very simple. The process is that people can borrow container at one place and return it at any other locations. We started with takeaway, so you can come directly to the restaurant, order the container, order the food, the takeaway in the reusable, and then return back to any location after you eat. And we are proud to be the first one in the world able to partner with GrabFood, Deliveroo, Foodpanda, the food delivery platform in Singapore, so that when you order food online, the food will come with reusable containers, and then you can return back to those 150 restaurants. So the model we The business case that we worked with Bearpack in different markets really depends on the country, the market itself. So we know that in Singapore, it's very hard, almost impossible to ask the restaurant to pay for us. So we decided to have the user will be the one who pay for our services with a subscription fee of $2.99, and it's been great. We identified user who is the one who to pay is because we know that there's a segment of people in Singapore willing to pay extra so that they don't receive food. Sorry, they don't receive single-use packaging waste come to their home. So basically, they don't want it. So therefore, they're willing to buy our services. But when we launched in Paris, in France, we started with the model that user pay, but then we realized that in Paris, in Europe in general, the restaurant able to pay and also willing to pay a subscription fee to use our products. So for us, it really depends on which country that we or which market we launch this reuse model, so that we are very flexible with our business model to fit into the market that we launch. So that's for us. That's for the first question: how we seek to eliminate single-use and disposable plastic products. We also we call them ourselves a tech embedded, a tech enable company. So the packaging for us is pretty simple. It's the off the shelf. There's nothing special about it. But the way that we work with this packaging is different. It's more innovative than the linear economy, and um, and and also the way we connect with restaurants that uh, uh, connect with restaurant and convince them to use our services is how we uh, reduce the single-use packaging. The second question is how we can better foster reuse model in the economy. I would say there are three two big buckets, or two big aspects to look into. The first thing is the technology. Even though we are not a tech company, which is a enabled tech company, but technology play important part uh, for in reuse. So, for example, in Vietnam, the amount of people have credit cards is less than 9 or 6%. So, very small amount of people can have credit cards. So for the reuse system to work, we need to make sure that the product, the reusable container, will return back to the system, right? So we have to find a way to track it. And one way to track it without using money as an intermediate player between user and restaurants. So we link user with credit card and make sure that they will return the containers. But in Vietnam, because not so many people have a credit card, so that we can use this system, and also the payment system in Vietnam is quite fragmented, so we can have credit cards as a insurance that people will return the containers. However, in Singapore, we see that 100% of the people have credit cards. The payment system is very smooth in Singapore. So this credit card will help us to track and make sure that the container can go back to the ecosystem. So technology is important. Um, New technology to track and to, for example, RFID, NFC, will help us to make sure that we can collect data and make sure that we can track these containers, so, to just to ensure so that we can watch and ensure the life cycle of the product. And the second pillar that we look into is that how we can better foster the reuse model is the regulation and the government and this means so for now the challenge that we have in Bearpack is that plastic or single-use packaging, not even plastic, they have very competitive price. They're very easy to find. Basically, you can see them everywhere because they already have the supply chain and distribution has been established for more than 60, 70 years, right? And reuse model or the reuse yes model is very new. Let's say it's maybe less than 5 or 10 years. So in order to compete with single-use packaging, our products have to be also cheaper and easier to find. And regulation will help us to reach that competitive pricing and accessibility. Yes, so that's my two notes on the questions that I got.
Thank, we're back. Thank you, Lynn. That was very good. Very innovative. I don't want to go into too much detail because I know we're running a little bit short on time. So we're going to go to the next intervention, which will give us time so that we can have at least a question before we close this session. So we're going to move straight to Eric Kawabata, who is the head of Asia Pacific of TerraCycle and Loop managing over 100 programs in the region, working with governments and numerous multinational conglomerates to help eliminate the idea of waste and providing recycling and reusable packaging platforms. So Eric, if you can turn your camera on and provide us with your intervention, or how can we better foster the reuse models in the economy, that would be really great. Can you hear?
Yeah, thank you for that kind introduction. My name is Eric Kawabata. I've been working in sustainability for about 13 years now. Previous to that, I was an investment banker and I've been in the APAC region for over 20 years. And with TerraCycle now for about 8.5, 9 years. And we're a company that really started on creating recycling platforms and trying to drive a value chain for post-consumer waste. And there are many challenges to that. And we soon realized that in order to really achieve circular economy and reuse, you need to redesign for circular economy and have a paradigm shift away from disposability into reuse. And when we examined, how to best foster that or how to make this successful, we decided to take a look back, why it did not last. Reuse was very prevalent 100 years ago and it disappeared. And why is that? It's really simple. Disposability is cheap. Disposability is convenient. And that's really hard to compete with. And so when we designed this platform, we really focused on how do we make it attractive to the manufacturer, to the retailer, to the user. And it really takes a global ecosystem to achieve something like this. So the platform enables any manufacturer to produce reusable products and packaging, and for any retailer to make those available to their consumers. And the advantages of reuse, are many. There are costs as well. But one of the advantages is if you spend more money to make something durable, and from a manufacturing perspective, if you can scale adequately, eventually your amortized cost, right, per sale can go down if you can reuse that package many times. Moving from disposable to durable also unlocks better design, better functionality, making that a benefit to the consumer as well. The platform is also designed so that someone can participate without changing their lifestyle. If you ask someone to completely change their lifestyle to participate in reuse, it's going to be a big hurdle. Well, think about this. In Japan, for example, people go to the supermarket about once a week to do their grocery shopping. Now, if you had to go somewhere else to return your reusable packaging, it could be quite burdensome. But if you're going to the supermarket anyway, you can take your empties back when you buy new products. You don't have to change your lifestyle. You don't have to add any more CO2 into the environment, right? The other thing, better design. more attractive packaging, right? Maybe even longer shelf life in the long run, maybe IoT packaging, maybe better benefits for health and safety, right? From the manufacturer perspective, and thankfully, consumers are demanding this, so manufacturers are responding. In addition, ESG requirements and impact on shareholder equity and valuation also driving retailers to do the right thing, manufacturers to do the right thing as well. From the retail perspective, we find that brick and mortar retail, not just online, but brick and mortar retail, want to be more a part of the community, not just a place to sell things. They want to be part of the future marketplace, provide content. And how to scale this, has been the biggest challenge. Everything becomes more feasible with greater scale because greater scale leads to greater efficiency, lower environmental impact, and less cost. And so what we've done is not create new infrastructure. We've leveraged existing infrastructure. For example, don't create a new 3PL just to distribute and collect. Use existing distributors for food products, for daily convenience products, and leverage reverse logistics for the pickup without any addition of more CO2 to the environment. What about waste carriers? We can leverage waste carriers who have infrastructure with route logistics going around all the cities in this region as well. Adding another business line, moving from just waste to also reuse carriers. And the final thing that we're doing is moving not just on B2C, which has been the main focus, but also B2B. Government, private offices, hotels, restaurants, and factories. In a single location, you have access to 5,000 users in a subscription model. You think about hand soap, hand sanitizer, cleaning products, all being sold currently in disposable packaging, in a larger scale, providing it to them in a reusable platform that can help to scale. And the final initiative that we're leveraging, or we're employing on to accelerate, I think this the scale, is government support. And we've approached local government to ask them to help us bring on board more small and medium enterprises. This shouldn't be just available to large companies. We need to democratize access to reuse. And so getting subsidies and support from local government to help bring in small, medium enterprises, manufacturers, retailers, carriers, and the local economy as well to join in has helped to drive local movements, which can all network into the national network with Loop. And so these are the different ways we're working to try to accelerate scale, drive efficiency, and lower environmental impact by making this accessible to everybody, to make it easy and convenient for use, and helping it to hopefully be more efficient and cost productive for both the manufacturers, hopefully for the consumers in the future, and the retailers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eric. That was really good. Sounds like Eric and Jody have a lot to talk about. And I was thinking that with the way he mentioned that the life cycle maintaining, making sure you're using the existing frameworks that are in place, and also the stakeholders to be more efficient, completely aligns with Nestle's saying that we're working towards a packaging and including plastic ending up in landfills. And like you were saying earlier, in terms of procurement, you have those challenges. And how do you keep the brand, and how do you make sure people's lifestyles don't change, and you're having to teach people about behavioral change? So how do you intervene without forcing people to completely change their behavior, which is the most challenging part, to getting people to stop using plastic or even the continuous use? So I think this is really good for, so hopefully the two of you will link up Jody and Eric and discuss more so that we can see how we can continue to use Nestle products. All right, so that concludes the session for today. We will now go into the open section. We're going to start with the online for the Q&A, and then we will come into the session that's live. So the first question from online.
Audible?
I think waiting for it to be.
Hello, am I audible? Hello? Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, Vikas Chaudhary here from Gemini Corporation, NV, Belgium. So in the recent years, some notable startups have created some great business models for circular economy, but none of them have been able to make an impact for more than 50,000 tons a year. So since time is running out, how can we create some business models which can be replicated at a larger scale? Maybe especially in the emerging economies where the availability of plastic waste feedstock is a big problem. So it's the question to all the panelists.
I didn't understand the question.
Okay, because can you do us a favor? Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
So my question is, since the time is running out, how can we create business models that can be replicated at a larger scale, especially in the emerging economies where the availability of plastic waste feedstock is a big problem?
Thank you. Thank you so much because we heard that. So I will open the floor. Who would like to take that question to the panelists? Yeah. Okay.
Asana?
Jody?
Can you hear me now? Yes, okay. So when we're looking at the question of designing a system at scale, it has to be a system that works for consumers. I think as Eric very eloquently spoke to, we need to have all players involved in system planning, and we need to look at clarifying, for example, how would we run a system that would be either a pool or individual systems, so that we can drive down cost and make it possible for every company to participate in a reuse system. Not only large companies, not only small companies, but companies all along the supply chain size. We also need to clarify who pays. Is it the consumer who's paying, the producer who's paying? Will it be managed by a nonprofit association or producer responsibility body? Every country needs to determine their own answers to those types of questions if we're going to look at scaling up reuse. And lastly, I'll say to the consumer experience, because deposit management systems that are successful globally are run by the right pricing level locally and also convenience for the consumer. If we don't have convenience in drop-off, whether it's in sacks, we can't imagine a world where people are going to wait in lines behind deposit return machines one by one waiting to get credits for individual packages. We need it to be as convenient as single use today if it's going to be successful. So there needs to be a quality element built in so that there are incentives for retailers to want to be pickup points. Retailers need to offer an environment that's conducive to clean and safe food sales. And that's really important to keep in mind when we think about how do we scale up reuse, is that the collection needs to be as high quality as the production of the food and the delivery to the consumer in the retail environment.
Thanks. And can I add from an emerging economy perspective? Okay. Thanks so much. So I think just some sort of learnings we have from some of our contexts is we have, for example, reuse models where we see small suppliers of quite niche products or limited production of products, even if they're sold to in sort of lower income settings, that don't have the sort of production scale, that have very limited networks in terms of supply. And then we've also seen bigger brand owners that are looking to, in reuse models, supply products to more informal, lower income areas, a range of different stores around the country, but needing to supply at smaller volumes. And then scaling from a really big brand owner with extensive logistics networks, producing very large volumes of product, to then link them and get their specific logistics network to go to every little spaza store or the sort of shops we see in the informal settlements and more rural areas. They're not seeing the return on investment. So what we've seen is something of a greater collaboration that is needed, where the big brand owners with very recognizable products, which consumers across the country are looking to buy. So there's brand recognition. If they then link to the already existing distribution within sort of informal sectors through small, medium, and micro enterprises who have the existing, the very small vehicle deliveries into settings where you can't get big vehicles in, for example, where you have retailers with a range of stores from big metropolitan areas to the very rural areas. So there's already existing networks. So we see now a better forming of partnerships between the bigger brand owners with some of those who are skilled in supplying product to a large number of low-income consumers in different areas. So I think we're emphasizing in our context, in order to scale, as I mentioned, we're not particularly looking to scale the return the extensive logistics networks, the infrastructure to access those containers again, to clean them adequately, to do all the health and safety and compliance checks, which can be incredibly onerous. So we're looking at those networks, and we've seen some exciting potential new partnerships start in that phase. And that's how we feel there's most likelihood to scale rapidly in our context.
Thank you very much, Kristen, and Vikas, thank you very much for that question. So we will now move to questions in the room. Please raise your hand and the microphone will be passed to you.
Thank you. My name is Ruth Spencer. I'm from Antigua and Barbuda. And I listened to a lot of the discussions this morning. And that change that we want to happen, it's gonna start with the people. When we link all the negative impacts of plastics and all the different ways on people's health and the environment, on the soil, on our water, when people make those connections, the change is gonna come real fast. When I traveled on Saturday on British Airways, I saw our local food catering service hooked up to the plate. And when they served us the meal, the first time I'm seeing cardboard cutlery, cardboard containers for the food. And I said, wow, that local business starts the change. And I think if the major donors, the UNEP, if you move from your silos, just passing information to governments, if you get that information to committed people in our countries, the change is going to take fast. Because people, even though the government have policies, legislation, it's the people going to hold the governments accountable. Last week on social media, the government dumped a lot of e-books in the landfill. People are the stewards. People are who's going to make the difference. And man, they were showing the pictures all over the island. It woke up the government. People understand what's happening. People want the change. And if you connect with the right people in country, the right NGOs, the right groups who are doing the work, you're not going to have no problem. So just start to get that information feeding down to the people. The people at the grassroots level, they're going to make the change. We're not waiting on governments. We're going to hold them accountable. So it's good to be here. It's good to hear from people. The science, everybody have to come together and educate people. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that intervention, Mood Spencer. We'll take one more question. Okay.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle.
Good afternoon. My name is Makuba Aim. I'm executive of business. My society work in social business and recycle plastics and we use circular economy. So I'm really happy, delighted to take part, to be invited in this meeting, in this conference. And all I've heard today is really comforting because we're on the right track and circular economy today is not the only solution, but it has to be the immediate solution that has to be implemented. And if you want to be successful, and if we want this new circular economy, we need to work together. When I say working together, we need to involve citizens, local authorities and businesses as well, and the state as a part to play, an important part to play to be successful with the circular economy. But the issue we have is that today there is we need to act urgently, but are we acting enough? in a systematic way to fight this type of plastic pollution. What's happening in Europe today, if we compare with what's happening in Africa, our territories, our governments, our businesses have trouble to have the funding necessary. We talk a lot about technology, we talk about funding, but today I think that if we need sustainability for a sustainable circular economy, we need opportunities. We need to act for us in two ways. There is constraints. In Senegal, there is a plastic law that has been implemented recently. So they need to recycle products for new products. I think that this is something that should be considered, and to think on how to implement at ministries level for developing countries a scheme to fight plastic pollution. Because for me, it would be very important today to have schemes very similar to what we have for climate. We have less schemes with concrete actions. So we have initiated a lot of schemes with different ministries in Senegal, and this shows very concretely that circular economy is a reality and maybe a sustainable solution. I'll give you two projects today to show you how today, from a systemic point of view, we can involve all the stakeholders in this circular economy. We have signed a convention in Senegal. It's a business which is working in agri-food. This society is they sell mineral water in Senegal. We have signed a convention with one city in the Dakar area, and with the help of the Ministry for Environment and other ministries, we have we got them all together to work on a project which is called the Big Challenge to fight plastic pollution. We are trying to solve two problems, two issues at the same time, to set up areas to collect plastic, to create jobs on the one hand, and to see how manufacturing new products using this plastic which is being collected. So in Senegal, 84% of families we are trying to find one response to an issue which is transversal, which is cross-cutting and solve different problems at the same time. We have done this at an education level. We do not have enough tables in schools in Senegal, so using plastic, we can manufacture stool and benches for schools. We've got a thermocompression system, and so we are losing trees as well, and we're trying to fight against this. So we are trying to do two things at the same time. I think that we've got solutions that are very easy, feasible, but the issue we are waiting to have big solutions to fight plastic pollution. We need to act locally as well, and not acting only globally. Now, what I would like to say as well, it's funding. Today, to fight plastic pollution, we need funding for technology, to collect and to raise awareness. So how this treaty today is going to help us to have access to this kind of funding. And this is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Makuba. We will now move to the next question.
Very much. Thank you very much. My name is David Azula. I'm from the Center for International Environmental Law. My first, riffing on the previous two comments that were made, which I think are extremely important, going back to the responsibility and the role that people can play in implementing solution and developing the appropriate treaty, that to me talks to the very, very critical point of ensuring clear, transparent, and effective participation in this very process. If the responsibility is going to be on people, if we believe that people are going to bring the change, it is important that people can actually be in the room while we discuss the problem and understand the solution. And I invite all of the delegates that are here this week to think about this and support wide participation in the process, because we will not succeed if we don't bring the people in the early part of the discussion. And now my question was originally going to be asked to Kirsten, but I think it is relevant for all the different speakers as well. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear the projects that are being put in place. I'm wondering how circular economy is defined in the South African Plastic Pact and in the different projects that are being presented here. And in particular, I'm wondering about how elements beyond material and resource use is considered in the context, in the projects that are being here. Circular economy was originally based on two pillars: resource use reduction and reduction of externalities. And we too often only hear about resource use reduction and very little discussion around the reduction of externalities, and in particular, the health externalities and the toxicity aspect of some of the plastic that we're trying to recirculate. So I just wanted to ask for the panelists, how are they considering this particular issue and implementing this in the project that they're trying to develop? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we'll let Kristen address that question and open the floor to other panelists that would like to support the answer as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and thank you for the question. So in the Plastics Pact model, in terms of the externalities related to health and toxicity, that's embedded within our Target 1, which is addressing problematic and unnecessary plastics. And they're very specific, defining, obviously that sounds like quite a broad definition, but within that is where plastics within their manufacture, within their makeup themselves, have chemicals, have additives, etc., which have been mentioned quite extensively today, that are toxic to human health and the environment, that this is something, a scan we should be doing. Saying that, I have to note that within South Africa, we don't yet have very good data on the use of specific additives and chemicals within our system. So we see also increasing research looking at microplastics in the environment. So we have some understanding of microplastics. As we all know, we don't yet have a good handle on globally the impacts of microplastics. So there's been a collation of studies looking at the current impacts as far as we know, but we're recognizing big gaps in our knowledge. We don't yet know the extent of the impacts on human health and the environment, but there are indications that there are quite significant impacts. So in terms of our approach to that within South Africa, it's something that we recognize, but we don't yet have very specific data. There is a UNEP team currently looking at persistent organic pollutants within the South African plastics industry. So we're busy accessing some of that data, and one of our key industry bodies is going to be looking at that in more detail as far as I understand. So it's there in our approach. In terms of the specific data and evidence we need to engage on it more effectively, that's something we need to build on in South Africa currently. So there's something, but there's a lot more work to be done.
Thank you, Kristen. Would any panelists like to add? Okay, Jody?
Sure. So David, to add on to the second part, not addressing the materials on the upstream, but the other challenges related to plastics. One of the things that we've done at Nestle is we've moved to simplify materials. So moving away from multi-layer materials to monomaterials. Those monomaterials may be polyolefin-based plastics, they may be paper, they may be metal. And so this is a shift that we're making across our portfolio, which today encompasses about 55,000 stock keeping units. So there's a lot of work to be done in making those transitions. Secondly, we've rolled out our own, what we call the negative list of materials that we've chosen to voluntarily phase out. And this is public on our website. And it's a selection of materials that are difficult to recycle or today unrecyclable. And we're in the process of phasing all of those materials out by 2025. This is something that we as a company have done voluntarily. And I particularly wanted to recognize the intervention by the dynamic woman from Antigua, because we are part of a group in the Consumer Goods Forum called the Plastic Waste Coalition for Action. This group developed golden design rules for materials. And unfortunately, or fortunately, you could say, there are only about 36 companies that have signed up to implement these rules in their design of packaging materials voluntarily today. There are millions of companies in the world, and we'd love to see all of them join us in rethinking how they're applying materials, which materials they're choosing, so that we can drive end-of-life recyclability, whether that's for a material, a package that's going to be reused 10 or 20 times before it's recycled, or if it's going to be for a package that's going to be recycled after a single use. We need to have the right materials in circulation for both models.
Yes. Thank you so much, Jody, and thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to those that posed such great interventions and mostly passionate points and questions that were posed. So we are going to end at the panel 3, but I would like to remind everyone to keep this engagement and also, most importantly, your passion for the next session. So we would like to, I'm so sorry, we're really over the time, but I would like for you to hold that question because it's not long, but we will be going to another panel. That panel, it will be after our lunch. So we would like everyone to reconvene here after our lunch. And to wrap up this session that we just had, I would like for us to just have a few key takeaways quickly. And one thing we do understand is that new business models are needed to support new circular economy-based services. And the consumer behavior is required for addressing plastic pollution. It's very evident. And speakers, as you've heard, they've referred to the innovative business models, which are being tested and adapted to different countries. New business models will need to be accompanied by specifications and standards to operate at scale, as you also heard mentioned by the other interventions. Now, the new business models will need to be accompanied by specifications and standards, and speakers also reflected that on the importance of undertaking life cycle assessments to fully understand the impact and the opportunities of innovative business models. So transitioning to a circular economy for plastic, it creates a huge opportunities for businesses which can improve economic, environmental, and social outcomes. Overall, and particularly can create jobs. And with us at DGGI, we tend to say a lot of green jobs is always good. If potential trade-offs for vulnerable groups that have adapted to the linear models are also addressed proactively, multi-stakeholder involvement, good understandings from consumers, participation on the entire supply chain, technologies, incentives, and taxes, integrated policies, including extended producer responsibility, and recycling across supply chains are critical to achieving long-term change at scale. We must also leverage existing infrastructures for new business models in strategically important to manage the carbon footprint of innovative business models. So scale can be secured by engaging not only the B2C market, but also strengthening B2B relationships and relying on government support at all levels. So thank you, everyone that participated on this panel. We look forward to seeing you at the next panel right after the lunch.
What time do we come back from?
We should be back at 2 p.m. sharp. So please make sure you're back here at 2 p.m. for the next panel.